Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I'm Robert Winfrey. I'm your host. I'm flying solo this evening. Jeff Harris is busy at the D23 Expo, and you can check out all of his coverage of that event in most of the movies TV section of 411 Mania. He's also, I think, still very, very happy about a Moon Knight series coming, and frankly, so am I. I'm kind of sad he wouldn't be able to be in the Netflix aesthetic, because I said right after Daredevil Season 1, I really hope they get Moon Knight to fit that same kind of, street-level, gritty, violent aesthetic that they had going on, and I hope they stick to that, because that is not a character that you can do in a happy, friendly, go-lucky way. There's violence, there's mental instability, and a lot of both. So, fingers crossed, but looks good. Anyway, Jeff should be back next week. In the interim, it's just me, and on the docket this afternoon, evening, whenever you happen to be listening, a preview for UFC on ESPN Plus 15. This is the UFC's card this coming Saturday that starts at like 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the first prelim. So that's a thing. Also, not a tremendous amount of news, but a bit. Conor McGregor's trying desperately to rehab his image after punching an old man in the face in a bar for refusing to drink his whiskey. So we'll talk. He had an interview with. We'll talk a little bit about that. UFC 243 gets a little bit fleshed out, and what's up with flyweight? I mean, there's been some noise made very recently that I think bears a little bit of discussion, so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about this evening. Let's go ahead and jump into that then, since not much else to plug in the beginning. Alright, UFC on ESPN Plus 15. This is not a great card. I think I've heard this referred to as a regional level card with the top two fights are genuinely UFC quality fights. Your main event is women's strawweight champion Jessica Andrade looking for her first title defense against Weili Zhang. Now, Zhang is not the most undeserving title challenger in UFC history, even in UFC recent history. I think if we wanted to limit that discussion. But she's also very clearly being plugged in here to be local Chinese talent on a UFC card in China. This is very much, I hate to say out of her depth, because she might shock the world and win. But she's on a good streak. She's on a 19-fight winning streak. She's 3-0 in the UFC. She showed up Danielle Taylor. She submitted Jessica Aguilar and then beat Tecia Torres in her last fight. Now, unfortunately, some of those don't carry the same weight they did 4 years ago, when Jessica Aguilar was, maybe one of the better strawweights in the world. I mean, 7 years ago, I think she was ranked as the best strawweight in the world. And Tecia Torres used to be a real fixture in the division. Now, Ticia's on a 4-fight losing streak, coming off of her most recent loss to Mariana Rodriguez. And Jessica Aguilar has like one win in the UFC. Yeah, Aguilar in the UFC is 1-4. Also coming off a loss to Mariana Rodriguez. So, I mean, again, submitting her the way she did. She was the first person, I believe, to submit her. Well, first since her debut. So, it's not like Zhang is some kind of complete charity case. She's not. She's a very talented up-and-comer. And much as I hate the UFC's constant repetition of the line, so-and-so is blank country's best shot at best hope for a UFC title, at this point in time, I think it is fair to say she is the best Chinese fighter on the UFC roster. Well, certainly in the best position to challenge for a title, even if she weren't fighting for the belt, even if they'd gone with someone else for Andrade's first title defense. Weili Zhang is probably still the best positioned fighter to score a UFC championship. But again, that doesn't mean she's not the beneficiary of the UFC's penchant for playing on nationalism when booking cards like this. I mean, I remember this very distinctly. Their first trip back to Brazil in, however many years or what have you, they booked Brazil versus the world. And I heard this somewhere, I can't remember where, but I think it's probably true. Brazil's not so much passionate about MMA as they are fiercely nationalistic. So getting to watch their countrymen succeed at anything is going to get a bit of a result. There's also a giant sort of question around this fight about Jessica Andrade, because I've mentioned this before. The Chinese Broadcast Authority has banned visible tattoos from martial arts competition. So if you have any, they have to be covered up. It's apparently such a big deal that local MMA promoters in China just won't promote you if you happen to have visible tattoos. And Jessica Andrade has several. Her entire right shoulder is done. Now she got part of her back done. So it's not quite clear what's going to go on with that. Again, the fight does seem to be on. We're leading up to fight week. They've done media tours. So there's stuff going on. But how that's going to be presented is still a little bit of a question mark. I mean, it's kind of a bizarre thing because the UFC is very keen to make inroads into China. They've invested a lot of money into building their performance institute there. They are willing to hold cards. They've signed a bunch of Chinese fighters. So they're willing to make inroads and invest money, and for a significant portion of the Chinese government to basically go, okay, no visible tattoos. That immediately disqualifies, 45 to 55% of the UFC's roster? I mean, there's a lot of guys and girls with ink in the sport. However you feel about it, that's just a statement of fact. So, who knows? As for the fight itself, I have no reason to pick against Jessica Andrade here. Again, Zhang has a lot of potential. She's fast, she has quick hands, she's light on her feet, she moves well. She's got a relatively diverse game, she's got decent physical strength. There's a lot good about her game. But, I mean, the only person Jessica Andrade has lost to at strawweight is, I believe, Joanna. Yeah, once she dropped, she is 7-1 at strawweight, with that one being Joanna Jędrzejczyk. And, I mean, Joanna's just a terrible, terrible stylistic matchup for Andrade. And, an exceptional fighter herself. I'd need a pretty specific reason to pick against Jessica Andrade, and I don't really get that out of Weili Zhang. Could be wrong, but again, that's not really what... I'm not saying she can't win, I'm just saying, you know what? Andrade, pretty handily, if I had to bet money on it. Your co-main event is also pretty solid. You have Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, a profoundly underappreciated fighter. He has lost once in his UFC career. That was his UFC debut. It was a split decision that could have gone his way. Since then, he has won 7 fights in a row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 7 fights in a row. He's finished 4 of those, including the last 3, when he has knocked out Sean Strickland, Luigi Vendramini, and submitted Curtis Millender. Is he even ranked? I think he is, but I don't think he's where he should be. Now again, some of that's a little bit of, okay, the level of opposition is not always there. But, yeah, he's ranked 14th in the world. Somehow Nate Diaz jumps to 7 by beating Anthony Pettis. This is asinine. Both Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos and Vicente Luque should be significantly higher than they are. They are 14 and 15. Dos Santos is 14, Luque is 15. Somehow they are ranked below Robbie Lawler on a skid. Anthony Pettis, 1-1 in the division. Okay, they could be. I can see them legitimately being below Askren and Maia. But Diaz, Till? I think I'd say Darren Till's on a 2-fight losing streak. Hang on, I gotta make sure that's accurate. I know. Yeah, he lost to Woodley and then he got knocked stupid by Jorge Masvidal. That's the last we've seen of him. 2-0. Both finishes in the second round. You have another fight signed? He does not. So, somehow, these two guys with extreme winning streaks and impressive wins are ranked lower than a bunch of people. And again, I mean, why is Rafael dos Anjos number 5? I love RDA. Okay, I think he's a profoundly he's one of those all-time greats who's going to be forgotten. He should not be ranked 5th at welterweight right now. That's just not the position he's in. This is insanity. This is absolutely insanity. What the hell? Who's doing these rankings and why are they so bad at it? Ugh. It's pathetic. I'm a little bit pissed now, and I almost want to just yell about that. Anyway. He's fighting Li Jingliang, who has a really good UFC record, actually. Jingliang debuted back in 2014. He is 8-3 in the UFC. And he's on a 2-fight winning streak. He had a 4-fight winning streak at one point. His losses are to Nordine Taleb. That was split. Arguably could have gone his way. He got choked out by Nakamura in the third round after dominating the other two. And he got beat by Jake Matthews. Fairly non-controversially, apart from him gouging Matthews in the eye. Just a horrible eye gouge. So this is a solid fight. I'm going with Elizeu dos Santos. I mean, again, he needs to be fighting a much higher level of opposition, but he's not. For some reason, he's not getting it. Dude should be ranked much higher. All right. Next up. Okay, for the record, I don't believe the bout order is completely finalized here. So I apologize if this winds up being out of order, but really, those are the best two fights. The rest of this card, we have a flyweight bout between Mark De La Rosa and Kai Kara-France. De La Rosa coming off of that loss to Alex Perez. He's 2-2 in the UFC. Is he back down at flyweight for this? Yeah, he's bounced around a little bit between flyweight and bantamweight. Whereas Kara-France is a pretty legit prospect coming out of Australia. Is that New Zealand? Okay, he's from New Zealand, yeah, sorry. There's one star different on their flags. So if I'm just looking at the flag, I sometimes have to double check that. Kara-France is on a significant winning streak. I mean, he was very nearly on the 24th season of The Ultimate Fighter, but he lost on the... he lost to Alexandre Pantoja. He might have been on it, but just... Because, he then did not get signed to the UFC. So he might have been on it and then just lost in the first round and they didn't re-sign him, but... He's 2-0 in the UFC with wins over Elias Garcia and Julian Paiva. He's not bad. So that's a legitimate fight. I think Kara-France... I don't know, I kind of gravitate towards him in this fight. Let's see. We have, I believe, the debuting Zhenhong Liu versus Movsar Evloev. Liu, yeah, this is his UFC debut. On a really good streak overall recently, jeez. He's got he's on a 1-fight winning streak, but the one loss that came right before that broke a 9-fight winning streak. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, excuse me. Assuming I can count properly, which is not a given. So that, and Evloev undefeated, 11-0, at least one win in the UFC. Yeah, he beat Seung Woo Choi earlier this year. I'm going to go with Evloev, but two, up-and-coming guys with a fair bit of potential, so we'll see. We also have Wu Yanan, who's 1-1 in the UFC and was last seen submitting Lauren Muller. Was this Lauren Mueller? Yeah, Lauren Mueller with an armbar. Lauren Mueller did not pan out the way a lot of people thought she would. Anyway, before that, she lost to Gina Mazzani, and she is fighting Mizuki Inoue, who is 13-5 overall, and made a bit of noise coming through Invicta. Some of the other, the former Deep champion, I believe. So kind of excited to see Inoue debut in the UFC. I'm actually going to lean towards Inoue there, but who knows. We have Kanan Song, who's on a bit of a tear. Right, I'm confusing him with Song Yadong, aren't I? Not that Kanan Song is bad. Because he's gone 2-1 in the UFC, coming off of the loss to Alex Morono, but before that had wins over Bobby Nash and Hector Aldana. So he's not bad. Anyway, he's fighting Derek Krantz, who made his UFC debut on short notice and got starched by Vicente Luque. I remember that fight. This actually seems like a bit of a soft touch for Song. Again, not a straight-up gimme, but softer for the hometown guy. Well, hometown. China's a large country, and I don't know where Song Kanan is from, so. We have Anthony Hernandez and Junyong Park. Hernandez 6-1. This guy lost his UFC debut, I believe. Yeah, Marcus Perez choked him out. I remember that choke. Good anaconda choke. And Park, making his UFC debut here, got a good winning streak overall. He got a 7-fight winning streak, which is not nothing, even against lesser levels of opposition. So, I don't know anything about either guy. Go with Park. Guess I don't know. Andre Sukumtat, who lost an ass-kicking contest to a one-legged man. Coming off of the loss to Montel Jackson, will be fighting Sue Mudaraji. Mudaraji's coming off of a loss in his UFC debut when Louis Smolka submitted him with an armbar. But I can't pick Andre Sukumtat to win pretty much anything at this point. Da-Un Jung will fight Hadis Ibragimov. Ibragimov is 8-0 and making his UFC debut. Yeah, did a lot of M1 challenge stuff, which is not... The Russian regional scene is legitimate. Whereas Jung, South Korea versus Russia, age-old rivalry, South Korea and Russia, in the sporting world. They bring out not quite as storied in the combat side of things like South Korea and Mexico, where they just bring out the killers in each other. Jung is on a very long winning streak. Jeez. Yeah, he's on a 9-fight winning streak. I'm gonna double check that. It might be 10. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, it is 10. Yeah, he's on a 10-fight winning streak coming into his UFC debut. Go with Ibragimov. Jeez. Okay, here's a legitimate fight. Finally. Damir Ismagulov, 18-1 from Kazakhstan, has at least one fight and has 2 wins in the UFC over Alex Georgis and Joel Alvarez, and has looked pretty darn good. He's on a very long winning streak. Jeez. So 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 13 fights in a row. Again, including 2 in the UFC. I'm actually excited for that guy's potential. He's fighting Thiago Moises, Brazilian. Has also fought in the UFC a couple of times. Lost to Beneil Dariush, then beat Kurt Holloway. That's a really good fight. Again, it's 2 up-and-comers. I'm going to go with Ismagulov there. I'm pretty high on him. Closing things out, we have 2 more fights. Carol Hossa will fight Laura Procipio, I guess. I'm going to have to hear that. These are both Brazilian ladies making their debuts in the UFC. Procipio, yeah, okay, that accent's going to be weird, but I'm going with Procipio until I hear otherwise. Undefeated at 6-0, whereas Hossa 11-3 overall, 2-fight winning streak coming into her debut. I'd go with Hossa, but again, I know nothing about either woman. And kicking everything off, apparently, again, I don't know the finalized bout order for this just yet. We have Bacharul Dana, who is Sri Lankan? Mongolia. Crap. Those flags don't even look anything like each other. Might be the first Mongolian in the UFC, actually. I'd have to double check that. Anyway, he's 6-1 overall, on a 2-fight winning streak coming into his UFC debut. And he will be fighting Hele Alateng. Going with Alateng, until I hear otherwise. Who's 12-7-1 on a 2-fight winning streak. Probably a bit of a setup for the Chinese fighter, in this case Alateng, to kind of get the night running off to a good start, but in some of the lower level circles of MMA, crazy stuff happens all the time. All right. Wait a minute. Evloev and they fought before. Can't believe I didn't see that at the. Emissar Evloev and Jung Hong Liu have fought before. Evloev, being the undefeated party, is the one who won the fight. That was back in 2015, so 4 years ago. Over 4 years ago, given the specifics of the timing, but that was an M1. Well, Liu's stepping in on relatively short notice. Evloev was supposed to fight Mike Grundy. So, this feels very much like a regional card with a UFC caliber main event, a good co-main, again, a legitimate UFC co-main event, and 1 or 2 fighters fights that along the way that you think, those are, but this, look, again, there's not a whole lot that I'm jumping out of my seat over. I will have coverage of this starting at, again, the first prelim is 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday. So in the MMA zone of 411mania.com, stop by, say hello. That's always appreciated. Gonna be a long night. Long night. Alrighty. Let us jump into the news then, I imagine. So the big story. Conor McGregor, after the... Okay, we talked a little bit about this last week, where Conor punched an old man in a bar for refusing to take a drink of his whiskey. And I imagine words were exchanged, and I did not really realize how big some of the blowback on Conor had been over this. I mean, look, I thought it was stupid, but I have not been plugged into the McGregor cult, the cult of Conor, for a while. I couldn't deal with... I think part of my breaking point with them was a bit of the Dolly bus incident with Khabib and whatnot. Because I saw what happened, and then my immediate thought was, I wonder how the cult of Conor's going to spin this so he's still a good guy. And if you'll remember correctly, their response to Conor throwing a dolly at a bus, breaking a window, getting 2 fights called off due to cuts from the flying glass, and his general just buffoonery and criminal behavior, just just an accurate descriptor of it, was, well, it's all a work. It's a pro wrestling style angle. This is a WWE thing. Which is stupid. No, he went on a bit of a rampage there for a little bit. It's ridiculous. But at that point, I was kind of like, all right, I am not going to pay too much attention to you people. Now, a few things about, and since there's a really interesting video by again Mixed Mollywoppery, where he puts forth the theory that, or the hypothesis rather, that we're seeing the third act of Conor McGregor's career. And in the true Shakespearean sense of the tragedy, it's his downfall. He talked a lot of trash. He made himself a huge star. He set bigger and bigger goals for himself. And I think I speculated a while ago on this podcast that there's a little bit of there's a very famous quote attributed in a scenario attributed to Alexander the Great. It perhaps most famously is quoted by Hans Gruber, the great Alan Rickman in Die Hard, and Alexander wept for he saw the breadth of his empire, that there were no more worlds to conquer, something along those lines. And I think I thought there was a bit of that in Conor. He needs a bigger mountain to climb. And after the Floyd Mayweather fight, that was it, man. You weren't going any higher than that. You sold the most pay-per-views in pay-per-view history. You fleeced thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. Probably more than millions of people, because they had a stupidly high buy rate. And, watch parties are a thing. You sold millions of people on the idea of you and Floyd being a loosely competitive boxing match, which is hilarious. That was such a hilarious thing to watch people buy into all that crap. But you did it. And you got paid. Not as much as Floyd, because your contract sucks and his doesn't. But, I mean, he came back for the fight with Khabib, I think because he could dredge up a little bit of personal animus for the man. And they did Khabib versus Conor is the most purchased UFC pay-per-view ever. Not like it wasn't successful financially, but again, if you watch Conor in the build-up to that fight versus the build-up to previous fights, I don't know, man. Again, it's not quite the same guy. And I think, in fairness, part of that was he's talking with Khabib, and Khabib just was not going to really engage him on that level. Khabib is just, Khabib is Khabib. Like, you're not going to shake that man's confidence with words. He is, and in fairness, you're not going to shake McGregor's self-belief either. Purely with words. There's nothing you can say to Conor that was going to, but anyway. And since then, he's just kind of, again, he had the incident in Miami when, okay, fair enough. His actions rose to the level of felony by virtue of a bit of a technicality when he destroyed someone's phone. And the level of, and the distinction between misdemeanor destruction of property and felony destruction of property is just the value of the property destroyed, and your cell phone's worth a lot of money. But, I mean, he was late at night, early in the morning, coming out of a nightclub, probably a little drunk. Somebody sticks a camera in his face. I didn't condone the behavior, but I can live with the. If that was like, that is demonstrably less egregious than, throwing, a hand cart at a bus, which. Then, there was news that broke about him being investigated for some kind of sexual assault in Ireland. Nothing's come out of that. Now, that might just be because the investigation is ongoing. Might be a lack of evidence. There's a lot of things that could be going on with that. But again, nothing more has really come of it apart from, there's an investigation. Now, whether it's open, whether it's ongoing, whether it's not closed, but they've stopped actively looking into it, kind of thing. Who knows? There's a lot of things fall under the category of being investigated. It's a broad categorization. And then there's just straight up video of him punching an old man in the face for not wanting to take a shot of his whiskey. And the old man, like, it was hilarious. He barely even moved getting hit by that punch. Vaunted power puncher Conor McGregor. And yeah, there was some. That seems to have been for a lot of people the not so much straw but brick that broke the camel's back. There's a lot of people who just went, all right, I made excuses for him. I looked at possible justifications for other actions, but I got nothing here. And this time around, he seems to finally be feeling it. Apparently, there was a thing of a bunch of different bars in Ireland just recording themselves throwing out his whiskey, which is, while certainly a statement you can make, you also did pay to have it in the bar in the first place, so he's technically already been paid. Because I don't think the distributor gets paid by the pour. I think that's just how the bar makes their money, because they have to buy the booze. But anyway, it's not a good thing. And he went on, he did an interview with Ariel Helwani on, I believe, ESPN. And did some of his mea culpas. Said it was his fault. There's not a whole lot to unpack here. He didn't say anything other than the expected high-profile athlete caught in bad behavior. He said he wants to fight Khabib again, and yeah, no. Look, man, I get that Conor's Conor and that he drives a lot of money, but I saw that fight. I don't need to see it again. I really don't, and it's not like lightweight is hurting for contenders. It's freaking lightweight. There is a depth of talent there that utterly belies, in many respects, McGregor's celebrity. In fact, giving in to McGregor's celebrity log-jammed the division for 2.5 years. Can we not do that again, please? We've got Poirier and Khabib coming up. After that, let's just get Khabib in there with the next guy. Or Poirier, whoever wins. I don't tell you who I'm picking, which is not to say that Dustin Poirier is incapable of winning that fight. In fact, next week I'm going to have a much more thorough look at that matchup. But, okay, assume Khabib wins. Just for the sake of argument. Schedule him and Tony. The winner of Cerrone and Gaethje, which... Why is Donald Cerrone ranked 4th? Didn't he just lose? He lost to Tony, okay. Yeah, that was that fight. Yeah, there's so many fighters in that division that are great. We don't need this. Keep the division moving. I think he also mentioned he'd be alright with a trilogy with Nate Diaz. And look, I'm okay with that fight. If you're just going to do the celebrity cash grab thing, Nate said, Nate after he beat Pettis said he would like to fight Jorge Masvidal. I am completely down for that fight. That's a great fight. If after that they want to go with Diaz and Conor for the third time, because hey, those were two highly purchased pay-per-view events. And look, I didn't resonate with either of those fights personally, but a lot of people really loved their rematch. A lot of people loved the first fight too. I mean, it's not really an either-or proposition as far as that goes. A lot of people love those fights. Again, me? No. I didn't resonate with them. But I get why people did. And I think that's an appropriate fight for Conor if you want to keep him in a very high-profile situation, but you don't want to shoehorn him back into the title scene. Again, there's not a tremendous amount to make out of this, but I think Conor's more doing his mea culpas from a PR standpoint, because, look, even if he does fight again a couple of times, and that's a lot of money he's going to make when he fights. Conor McGregor makes a lot of money when he fights. I mean, he's also floated, he wants to fight Floyd Mayweather again, which is hilarious because you ain't gonna shear that sheep again, guys. That's just not gonna happen. You made a stupid amount of money on that con job. Let it go. I think he kind of floated the idea that he was supposed to fight Justin Gaethje, and that fight fell through when he injured his hand. Which, in fairness, would have been a really good fight, because Gaethje kind of walks into a lot of what Conor does, but Conor also, I don't want to say a complete one-round wonder, but Conor McGregor drops off dramatically after the first 5 minutes. And Gaethje is a durable machine that will chew you up and spit you out. So it would have been a good fight, but I think my point was, even if he fights a couple of more times, Conor is trying to look towards his future beyond fighting a little bit. And I think his whiskey brand, or whatever spirits he's doing, because didn't he try that, I could have sworn I saw material for a rosé that he was branding called, Champ Rosé, something stupid like that. Look, I don't drink, guys, so I can't speak to any of this as far as quality. I've heard mixed reviews about his whiskey. And again, let me be clear, if that's kind of the direction he wants to look at for after fighting, okay. If you can make it, booze is a profitable business, man. People like to get drunk. I don't. I have religious and personal compulsions about not drinking, but people do seem to enjoy it, and if you've got enough of a celebrity status about you to put your name on something and help it sell, hey, that works. That's a model that's been successful for as long as capitalism's been around. I don't mean that as a negative. So if he's able to, if that's what he's looking at, I think he's trying to rehab his brand a little bit, because he does not want some of those more sustainable long-term avenues of financial return to go away, and that makes sense. Whether or not he's going to fight again, I don't know, man. I mean, he might. Again, there's options for him if he wants to fight, but there wasn't, because they were talking about having him fight again. He injured his hand, which put to bed a lot of the discussion. But I remember us talking a little bit last year about him, there being a dispute about him wanting to be in the main event of a pay-per-view instead of the co-main, and let's face it, he's got a point. You put Conor McGregor in the co-main event under Henry Cejudo and somebody else. I'm sorry, nobody's buying to see Henry Cejudo. They're paying to see Conor. And that is true for every champion on the roster except, first of all, clearly Khabib. And possibly, maybe John. I think if you get to those two guys, they're enough of a... I mean, again, Conor does massively outdraw John Jones. But I think you could make an argument on a couple of different fronts that John should main event over a Conor fight. But, I mean, I love Robert Whittaker, but you put him... He had the best fight of 2018, and it was one of the lowest purchased pay-per-views. Crying shame. Because that second fight with Yoel Romero was brilliant. Brilliant fight. But, nobody really bought it. Kamaru Usman, dominant fighter. But if you put Conor in the co-main event under Usman and Covington, you take a poll about how many people buy that for Usman versus how many buy it for McGregor. That's a landslide for McGregor. So I think he had a point there. And then again, he got injured, and that kind of put everything away as far as how the UFC builds their cards meritocratically and financially, and we talked about that. You can dig it up in the archives if you're so interested. But I don't know. There wasn't a tremendous amount to unpack. It was, again, this was a little bit if you've seen one star in the athletic field be caught behaving badly, you've seen their responses. this one came with a little bit more McGregor flavor than, I mean, a lot of them get up there and just like read pre-planned statements from lawyers and agents and whatnot. And Conor, while he did have some of that, is incapable of resisting the urge to inject himself into some of those things. And, fair play. A little bit of personality is not the worst thing in the world. I don't know. Again, I'm not sure the degree to which he is going to be successful in his endeavor to rehab himself. And I'm not sure he's going to fight again. And I don't know. I mean, I hate to be one of those guys who says, I don't care if Conor ever fights again, just to kind of be that guy. But I said here at the time, after McGregor-Diaz 2, when other people were fawning over the fight on Twitter, it did not really speak to me. I have never been all that enthralled with Conor under any circumstance. He's a good fighter. He's a very, very good fighter who has defeated some all-time greats. Jose Aldo, all-time great. Eddie Alvarez, all-time great. And he's done some pretty impressive things. But I've never been, I don't know. Let me put it this way. There is not a fighter in the world right now whose presence in the sport has a massively deterministic perspective on my ability to enjoy it. You could take my 5 favorite fighters and have them retire tomorrow. And I suppose I should rephrase that. There is no fighter, there is no set of fighters. Again, if all of them go away, okay, we can have a discussion. But it would take a catastrophic amount of fighters removing themselves from the sport to adversely impact my decision to observe it. I mean, I watch whether Conor's there or not. And yeah, sure, some of it's my job. But I was watching a lot of this long before Conor came into the sport, and I'll be watching after he goes away. You can argue degrees. Again, you can argue, do I enjoy it more if Conor's around? Personally, no. Your mileage may vary. Conor is a non-factor for me, as far as that goes. Certain fighters are more factors. Some of them are like John Vellante and make me want to slit my wrists. Some of them are like Tony Ferguson and make me just want to somehow sop up the metaphysical violence with a sponge and just devour with like Tony's fighting is like a really great stew. You just want to sop up all the gravy with bread. Like that's my relationship with Tony Ferguson fights. Like I love that. John Vellante makes me want to die. So there are extremes. For me, again, Conor's just meh. He's in the middle of the pack there. So I don't know. He's making some of the moves that have been documented to work in the past. We'll see how it plays out. If I had to bet on him fighting again, I actually do think this incident, coupled with Nate coming back, makes it more likely. The fastest way for him to rehab his image, and this is also universally true of athletes, be they fighters, football players, whatever, unless you engage in something, just like the most depraved, catastrophic, unforgivable acts, and let me be clear, even that is not proven to be true 100% of the time, returning to form and giving people what they want, be that success or the build-up, will allow you to rehabilitate your image. I mean, do I have to point to Mike Tyson here? Now, again, I know look at what Mike Tyson did to rehab his image. Look what football players do on occasion. You know what those guys get up to. It ain't good. By most reasonable standards of good. But a significant portion of the ability to rehabilitate their image comes from I can still perform the action that has given me this degree of fame and notoriety. And do it at a very high level. And that does make up a lot of ground when it comes to public relations. So between Conor needing to rehab his image a little bit and Nate Diaz coming back, those two are kind of made to fight each other when it comes to the money side of things. So, given where circumstances stand at the moment, I think we're more likely to see him return to fighting than prior to him punching that guy in the face. Prior to that event, I was shocked he came back to fight Khabib at all. A little bit. I thought he'd make his, $100 million from fighting Floyd and be done. But came back, fought Khabib, lost, made a lot more, he made what, like a straight up million in disclosed pay for that? A lot of money. Made a lot of money, had launched his whiskey brand by that point. I was a little surprised he came back, and then Khabib put him through a bit of a meat grinder. And now he's reached a point where fighting might have enough benefits to outweigh the risks for him in terms of just getting beyond some very, very unsightly public incidents. But prior to those incidents, I don't know. Again, I don't think coming back and potentially losing again was worth it. Now it might be, just to get back in the cage and fight and help keep the public consciousness turning beyond him being a bit of a mess. So I don't know. I do not know. Alright. It'll be interesting I'm sure it will be interesting to see play out. I mean, again, I'm not terribly invested in the future of Conor McGregor. But I'm not going to pretend he's not an important figure in the landscape of the sport either. That's just silliness. Alright. Let's move on a little bit here. What other news did we have? Oh, UFC 243 has received a little bit more fleshing out. This will air on October 6th of this year in Melbourne. It's headlined by Whittaker and Adesanya, and good God, just hooked that into my veins. But we've got some more of the fight card fleshed out. Al Iaquinta and Dan Hooker are signed for this fight, and great fight. I like that fight. I like Dan Hooker in that fight, actually, but that's a really good fight. Tai Tuivasa's getting a bit of a gimme fight against Sergey Spivak. Holly Holm is fighting Raquel Pennington. So again, and I'm not going to go over the entire card, but those are kind of the big hits that have been signed. I mean, Holmes, the news about Holly's at least a month old at this point, but I don't think it was worth talking about individually. So they're starting to flesh that card out. And again, Hooker and Iaquinta is a really good fight. That is a very, very solid co-main event if that's the position it winds up occupying. And again, that main event, I mean, what am I going to say about Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya? Come on. Watch their last fights. Watch the last two fights from each guy, then tell me you're not hyped for those two clashing. The build-up has been pretty interesting, actually. Adesanya is doing a lot of talking, and Robert Whittaker just does not care, man. I like Robert Whittaker. I get why elements of his personality don't resonate with the masses the same way that someone like Israel Adesanya does. But he's playing this pretty well. He's kind of getting Israel Adesanya to come off as the slightly crazier one. And again, the mental warfare before you get into the cage, is only useful in as much as it benefits you once the cage door closes. I mean, I saw people, to bring up Conor again, mentioning that, Conor didn't get under Khabib's skin. No, he did. But unlike, say, again, Eddie Alvarez, where the pre-fight, or Jose Aldo, where all the talk got them to fight in ways that they do not normally fight, and allowed Conor to take advantage, it did not help him at all against Khabib. It does not mean he was not successful in irritating him to one degree or another. It means that it did not manifest itself in beneficial ways. Trash talk is only useful in as much as it benefits you in the actual fight. At least from a practical standpoint, as far as the competitive angle goes. I suppose if you want to argue how much popularity one can glean from trash talk as a material component, fine, that's a separate discussion, though. So anyway, that's a pretty good. Again, that's a good top two fights. Um, I'm not in love with the rest of the card as currently announced, but that whole event's also over a month away, and we all know how MMA can be as far as events falling apart. Because it happens all the time. Alright, what? Oh, I remember the other thing I wanted to talk about. I'll try to be as brief with this as I can. But Dana White, at one of the, this has come up a bit recently, and I think it bears discussion, even if very briefly. Dana White's mentioned that Henry Cejudo has to defend the flyweight belt next against Joseph Benavidez, or give it up. That there's some stuff at 135, there's some contenders rising, there's some fights that have to play out to determine a real number one contender there. And in the interim, Joseph Benavidez has done everything you could ask for of a contender. I completely agree with that point, by the way. And he should get the next shot at the belt, or Henry gives up the belt. Again, the UFC spent a lot of time cutting a lot of flyweights. This is a bit of an odd tack for them to take. Not in the sense that I think it's incorrect, but I don't know. I mean, they're making the overtures that they're going to keep the division, but I'm still not sold on it. Now, I agree, flyweight's been held up now since the first fight between Cejudo and Demetrius Johnson. While Cejudo got injured, moved up to bantamweight, won that belt, and bantamweight's a much more competitive, fleshed-out division. But I mean, also recall after Cejudo beat Moraes for the vacant belt, he said, I would like to fight Uriah Faber and Cody Garbrandt, and like, what the hell? Like, you just ignore every deserving contender for the California middle-aged man. I thought it was ridiculous. I still think it's ridiculous. I mean, you've got guys like Aljamain Sterling, you've got Peter Yan, you've got, who was that? Corey Sandhagen, for crying out loud, who just beat Rafael Assunção so decisively. I mean, you've got those guys. Say nothing of, I mean, okay, Pedro Munoz coming off of that loss, but still on a bit of a run. You got Frankie Edgar dropping to bantamweight. You've got plenty of guys in that division, and yet he'd rather fight guys on losing streaks or old man Faber. Ugh. Just ugh. So, now again, Henry's still recovering from shoulder surgery, as far as from a competitive standpoint. I mean, he had it earlier, but I think even when he had it, they said he wasn't going to be able, the earliest, and he'd be pushing it, would be December of this year. So they might work something out by then. Again, I agree that he should defend the flyweight belt or vacate it. I think that's where things are with him right now. I don't know that he will. If some really juicy option at bantamweight materializes between now and then, they might go for that and just leave flyweight hanging in the wind, because the UFC doesn't care about the division. I mean, they finally got flyweight back to a point where there's at least 15 guys on the roster, if nothing else. But, it was so stupid. Like 3 months, they had like 10 people in the division. Even now, God, they cut so many talented guys. You have Tim Elliott ranked, and Tim Elliott spends more time at bantamweight these days. So many of these people are like, hey, I've got 3 fights in the UFC. I'm number 15. Just by virtue of having 3 fights. I don't even think Holly and Paiva's like 1 and 2. They might have exactly 15 fighters in that division, and that's what they... Oh, God. Look, I'm not saying the UFC is incapable of reinvesting in that division, but... Yeesh. It is not looking all that great at the moment. That's all I'm saying. So I don't know what they're going to do with that. Again, they're saying some of the right things, but... I don't know. mean, I don't know what's... Look, the UFC has been trying since they announced this division to get the belt on Joseph Benavidez. When they announced the tournament several years ago at this point, we all, myself included, said, okay, they're looking to give Joseph Benavidez a belt, and he's probably the best guy in this division, and Demetrius Johnson upset the apple cart. And then went on to have the most successful title reign in UFC history. And, good for DJ. I don't begrudge anybody involved in that whole thing anything. They got Joseph Benavidez a rematch, and he just got knocked out that second time around. That was Demetrius Johnson's only finish via strikes in the UFC, I think. Was when he knocked out Joseph. I mean, that's a hell of a one to pull off, if that's going to be your only one. Cold cocking Joseph Benavidez in the first round is one to do it by. But, again, I've kind of speculated that I'm not sure the UFC knows what to do with the weight classes below 155 pounds unless they can prominently feature Team Alpha Male in some respect. How much time did we screw around at bantamweight playing around with, oh, this guy's got beef with Team Alpha Male, so that's how we're going to do this? A lot. Wasted a lot of time with that. Now again, some of that was just, hey, these are the best two guys, and Team Alpha Male had a decent concentration of guys at that weight class. But they've wasted a lot of that time. And I just don't think they really know what to do with featherweight or flyweight. Now, featherweight, they had McGregor, and now thankfully they had a guy in Max Holloway who just buzzsawed through enough of the division that he became undeniable. But it took that kind of effort. While, I don't want to badmouth a few of the guys at flyweight because some of the circumstances were just against Max. I mean, however you want to slice it, some of it was just the positioning did not favor him, and that's not anyone's fault. Not really. But he did get to to the levels he's at now, and that's a monumental achievement. But, I mean, again, flyweight, I don't know that they really knew what they were doing with it. Bantamweight, again, they did not do a tremendous job of getting a lot of hype for Cejudo and Moraes after Dillashaw, who still had kind of the Team Alpha Male orbit, failed his drug test and got stripped of the belt and suspended. And it's one of the reasons that when Faber came out of retirement and beat the number 15th guy in the world, I don't want to say barely, but also pretty clearly got hurt in that fight at least once. They're like, oh, I knew. No, we're going to shoehorn Uriah Faber back into the title scene over Sandhagen, Sterling, Jan, all of these great guys. And I get the desire to make money. I get that this is a business. But trying to balance the pure business side of this with the sport component is what the UFC is there for. And if you're not going to make concessions to the actual sporting meritocratic side of things, you're basically pro wrestling. And I don't mean that as a compliment. So, again, I don't know what's up with flyweight. The UFC said things. We're going to have to wait to see Henry Cejudo's recovery timetable. And I hope they keep it. I love the division. I really do. Flyweight's one of my favorite divisions to watch. They do so much fun stuff. But, again, Dana's said a few of the right things about the division going forward. But there's so much up in the air, and let's also be clear, Dana White's word and $5 will get you a single cup of coffee at Starbucks. Alright, let me refresh Twitter, make sure nothing crazy is broken between now and then. I don't think anything has. Alright. Let me just get out of here then. Okay, as for my plugs this week, this Tuesday will be a special Damn You Hollywood. Thursday will be a special Damn You Hollywood, when myself, Alexis Hana, and Jason Teasley get together to review Ready or Not, the kind of horror comedy movie. It was released last week. Stars Don Johnson and I think Hugo Weaving's daughter, niece. Isn't her first name Miranda? Miranda Weaving, I believe. I'm going to confirm that, because I don't want to be... Samara Weaving, excuse me. What did I think Miranda? Also, is that Don Johnson? I've got to confirm with this. No, I don't think so. What am I confusing him with? It doesn't matter. Anyway, so we'll be reviewing that this Tuesday. Oh, niece, not daughter. Niece. God. Terrible. Anyway. There's a few Swamp Thing related events from last week. Source material for the part of Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing, issues 20 through 27. Mark and Sean Comer put the Wes Craven directed 1982 Swamp Thing on trial, and Mark and Jesse got together to talk about the DC EU streaming service, whatever they call it, television series Swamp Thing, which apparently due to a paperwork error wound up being such a massive financial pitfall that they're just leaving it. They're just canceling it. Get your paperwork done, people. We live in a bureaucracy. Have to live with it. Okay, and I think this Tuesday there's a TV party for something. Hang on, I'm going to look it up. This Tuesday... Oh, yeah, Superman... Krypton Season 2 will be this Tuesday. That's Mark and Jesse. And, may as well throw this out there. Well, there will be a TV party for the bizarre movie Zombie Tidal Wave on the 30th that I will take part in. For the Andrade vs. Zhang card, I did something for the previous event, for the Miocic-Cormier event, where I provided live, it was recorded, but live, alternate commentary with Mark for the main card, while also providing written coverage for 411 Mania. And I thought my head would explode when we decided to try it. It didn't. Didn't even come all that close. So we're trying it again for the main card, at least the main event, for Andrade vs. Zhang. So be on the lookout for that. You can find the alternate commentary for Miocic and Cormier in the archives on the Rattleton Broadcasting Network. And be sure to subscribe to the 411 Mania Podcasting Network. We've got Wrestling with Larry Zonka and a rotating cast of guests, usually Jeremy Lambert. For all things professional wrestling, you have the 411 interview series that Jeff Harris does when they can line up interviews for him. You have this show, of course. However you get it, thank you very much. Always appreciated. We'll be back next week, where we will have a review of this card and a preview of UFC 242, Khabib versus Poirier. Great co-main event, Edson Barboza and Paul Felder. Really good featured bout, actually, Makhachev and Hamos. Mairbek Taisumov and Carlos Diego Ferreira. There's a lot good about that card. That's a really good card, everybody. So thank you very much for that. Until next time, thank you all again. I'm Robert Winfrey. Stay safe out there, and please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.